There is a place that was never planned for humanity. Not a single line of scripture attributes its creation to a human destiny. Matthew chapter 25 verse 41 reveals the original recipient, and it is not who most people imagine. The story of how this place came to be begins long before the earth existed, long before the first breath of life in Adam, in a cosmic event that rewrote the rules of eternity. To understand hell, you need to go back to the most ancient point that the scriptures allow us to reach. Not to Genesis, not to the creation of the world, further back, to the moment when everything was just God and the beings he had formed before any particle of matter existed. Beings of such a high order that human language had to borrow words like fire, precious stones, and light to try to describe what they were. Ezekiel chapter 28 opens a window into this reality, and what appears on the other side is disturbing. There was a being, not just any being, just any. The original Hebrew text describes him as the anointed cherub who covers, an expression that appears only once in the entire Bible, indicating an exclusive position, unparalleled by any other creature. His description in Ezekiel 28, verses 13 and 14, defies any attempt at ordinary visualization. 9 precious stones covered his structure: sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, carbuncle, and emerald, each one set in gold. And this gold was not ornament. It was part of his very constitution. The text says that his tambourines and his flutes were prepared on the day he was created. This being did not merely exist in the presence of God. He produced worship as part of his nature. Every movement generated sound. Every displacement produced something that can only be described as involuntary music, as if his very structure were a living instrument, resonating glorification with every fraction of a second. Put into perspective what this means. He was not an ordinary angel among millions. He was the being closest to the throne. He walked in the midst of the stones of fire, a reference that most scholars associate with the immediate presence of God, with the celestial pavement described in Exodus chapter 24, verse 10, where Moses saw something like a sapphire pavement beneath the feet of the Creator. This cherub moved there with ease. He had unrestricted access. He occupied the highest point of the created hierarchy. No seraph, no archangel, no other class of celestial being mentioned in the scriptures occupies the position this cherub occupied. He was the absolute pinnacle of creation, and he was perfect. Ezekiel 28 verse 15 records with surgical precision, "You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created." Perfect. Not almost perfect, not with potential for perfection. Perfect, complete, without defect, without inclination toward error, without tendency toward corruption. This makes what happened next infinitely more serious, because it eliminates any argument of predisposition. Nothing in the design of this being pointed to what he would become. No manufacturing flaw, no hidden defect. The perfection was integral, verified, and declared by the Creator himself, and then something changed. The following verse completes the most disturbing sentence in Ezekiel. "Until iniquity was found in you." The Hebrew word used here is avel. Injustice, perversion, distortion. It did not come from outside. It was not the influence of another being. There was no tempter to tempt the original tempter. The iniquity was found within him. It sprang up where nothing of that sort should have existed, like a cancerous cell appearing in a perfect organism, except that this organism had been assembled molecule by molecule by the Creator himself. This is the paradox that theologians have debated for millennia without reaching a definitive consensus. How does evil arise within perfection? The biblical text does not explain the mechanism. It merely records the fact with the coldness of a medical report. And the fact is brutal. Ezekiel 28 verse 17 adds the identifiable cause. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. His beauty became fuel for pride. The wisdom that should have kept him in worship became distorted into ambition. The splendor that was a reflection of God's glory came to be treated as his own merit. He looked at himself, and instead of seeing a mirror of the Creator, he saw a rival. Isaiah chapter 14, verses 13 and 14 reveals what happened inside that being from that moment on. 5 consecutive declarations beginning with "I will," and each one is an escalation of cosmic ambition. I will ascend into heaven. Above the stars of God, I will exalt my throne. I will sit on the mount of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. And the last one, the one that sealed everything, I will be like the Most High. It was not a desire to destroy God. It was a desire for equivalence, to occupy the same level, to share or replace the throne. 5 sentences, 5 daggers into the cosmic order, and the universe would never be the same after them. What followed was not a battle like the ones popular imagination portrays, with flaming swords and cosmic explosions on a celestial battlefield. Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, describes the conflict with a precision that should send chills down the spine of anyone who reads it carefully. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back. And the text says something that changes everything. They did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Notice the construction. It does not say they were defeated in prolonged combat. It says they did not prevail, and that their place simply ceased to exist in heaven. As if the very structure of heaven had expelled them, rejected them, erased them. The space they occupied was sealed as if it had never existed. The text of Revelation identifies this being with 4 distinct names in a single verse: the great dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, and Satan. Each name reveals a different dimension of what he became. Dragon, raw destructive power; serpent, calculated deception, ancestral manipulation; devil, systematic accuser of the beings God loves; Satan, declared adversary of the eternal throne. 4 identities compressed into a single being, who began with 9 precious stones, golden flutes, and unrestricted access to the presence of the Most High. The fall did not merely change his position, it completely rewrote his nature. And he did not fall alone. Revelation 12, verse 4, records that the dragon's tail swept 1/3 of the stars from heaven and hurled them to the earth. The most widely accepted interpretation among biblical scholars, and supported by the context of the chapter itself, is that these stars represent angels, 1/3 of the heavenly hosts. Consider the scale of what this means. If the heavenly hosts are described in Daniel chapter 7, verse 10, as thousands upon thousands serving God, and 10,000 times 10,000 standing before him, 1/3 of that number is something that surpasses any human capacity for calculation. Not hundreds, not thousands, possibly billions or trillions of angelic beings who looked at the rebellious cherub and made a choice to follow him, to abandon their positions, to leave the dwelling that had been assigned to them, to trade eternal certainty for a gamble against the Creator himself. And it is at this exact point that the history of hell truly begins, because before this rebellion, hell did not exist. There was no need for it. There was no one for whom it was needed. The concept of eternal separation from God had no reason to exist in a universe where all created beings functioned in perfect harmony with the Creator. There was no destination of torment because there was no rebellion to torment. Hell is not part of the original design of creation. It is a consequence. It is a response. It is the direct result of a choice that should never have been made by a being who should never have desired what he desired. The eternal fire was born at the exact moment eternity was broken for the first time. Matthew chapter 25 verse 41 contains the clearest words of Jesus on this subject, and the construction of the sentence is surgical. He does not say the fire prepared for sinners, or the fire prepared for the disobedient, or the fire prepared for fallen humanity. He says with absolute precision, the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Prepared. The Greek word used is hetoimasmenon, something made in advance with a specific purpose for specific recipients. Hell was designed with a definite address, and that address was not human. It never was. Now, to understand how the biblical language about this place developed over the centuries, you need to follow the progression of terms that the scriptures use, because each term reveals a different layer of the same reality. In the Old Testament, the predominant term is Sheol, used 65 times in the original Hebrew text. Sheol was not exactly hell as most understand it today. It was the realm of the dead, the place where everyone descended after death, righteous and unrighteous, with no apparent distinction. Jacob expected to descend to Sheol when he died. David mentioned Sheol. It was a concept of post-mortem existence without the definitive moral weight that later terms would carry. But within Sheol, the scriptures begin to reveal divisions that change everything. Jesus, in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31, describes what happens in this world of the dead with a specificity that no other biblical text offers. The narrative of the rich man and Lazarus shows two compartments separated by a great impassable chasm. On one side, Abraham's bosom, comfort, peace, rest. On the other, torment, flames, unbearable thirst, and a distance that no soul could cross, no matter how much it wanted to. The rich man could see Lazarus, he could converse with Abraham on the other side, but he could not change his position, not even once. The division was irreversible and definitive. This detail changes the entire understanding. Sheol was not a single uniform destination. It was a realm with internal separations. And these separations reflected something that happened long before any human being died. They reflected the original separation, the fall of the cherub, the moment when iniquity sprang up where it should not have existed, and the very fabric of reality needed to reorganize itself to accommodate the consequence. Hebrew has another term that needs to be examined carefully, Gina, a transliteration of the Greek Gehenna, which in turn comes from the Hebrew Hinnom, the valley of the sons of Hinnom. And here the story gains a physical, geographical, and viscerally human layer. The valley of Hinnom was real. It lay to the south and southwest of ancient Jerusalem. You can visit it still today. It is a public park. But what happened there in ancient times transforms this name into one of the most horror-laden in all of biblical and historical literature. 2 Kings chapter 23 verse 10, 2 Chronicles chapter 28 verse 3, and Jeremiah chapter 7 verses 31 and 32 record that in this valley the Israelites, under the influence of idolatrous kings like Ahaz and Manasseh, burned their own children as offerings to the god Molech. Children, sacrificed alive in fire. The sound of drums and instruments was deliberately used to drown out the screams. The Hebrew name Topheth, the exact site of the sacrifices within the valley, possibly derives from toph, meaning drum. Drums playing to cover the sound of children burning alive in the incandescent metal arms of an idol. The level of human depravity that this valley represents is almost impossible to process. After King Josiah desecrated the site to permanently prevent the sacrifices, the Valley of Hinnom was transformed into Jerusalem's garbage dump. remains of dead animals, decomposing household waste, bodies of executed criminals who had no right to burial. Everything was cast there. And to contain the pestilence and sanitary risk, the fire was kept burning permanently. Sulfur was added in large quantities to accelerate combustion. Worms fed incessantly on what the fire could not consume. It was a place where literally the fire was never quenched and the worm never died. The air was unbreathable. The smell could be detected from miles away when the wind blew toward the city. Day and night, a thick column of smoke rose from that valley. When Jesus, in Mark chapter 9, verse 48, used exactly those words, "Where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched," every person who heard him knew exactly what he was referring to. It was not abstract metaphor. It was not figurative language disconnected from reality. It was the valley that lay just a few minutes' walk from where they stood. The smell reached the city walls when the wind changed direction. Jesus took the most horrible, most repulsive, and most traumatically charged place that his listeners knew personally and said, "The eternal destiny prepared for the devil and his angels is infinitely worse than what you see and smell every day." And here enters a detail that is almost never mentioned in popular discussions on the subject. Jesus spoke more about hell than any other person in the entire Bible. It was not Moses, it was not Paul, it was not John in the visions of Revelation. It was Jesus, the same one who healed lepers, embraced rejected children, forgave the adulterous woman, and wept before the tomb of Lazarus. In Matthew alone, Jesus mentions Gehenna 7 times. He described the place as outer darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth, an expression that appears 6 times in the Gospels, always on his lips, never from anyone else. He compared the fate of the condemned to being cast into the furnace of fire. He said without hesitation, that it was better for a person to pluck out their own eye or cut off their own hand than to go there with their whole body. Where does this intensity in Christ's words come from? From the fact that Jesus did not speak as a theorist, as a scholar, or as a prophet who received partial revelation. He knew he had been in eternity before becoming flesh. John chapter 1, verse 1 declares that he was with God in the beginning, before anything existed. Colossians chapter 1 verse 16 states that all things were created by him and for him. Thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers. This includes the cherub who fell. Jesus created the being who would become Satan. He witnessed the rebellion. He saw the fall. He participated in the decision to create the place of eternal consequence. When Jesus spoke of hell, he was not repeating learned theology. He spoke with the unquestionable authority of one who had witnessed every stage, from the radiant perfection of the cherub to his inner corruption, from the open rebellion to the definitive expulsion, from the creation of the eternal fire to the tragedy of watching human beings voluntarily walking toward a destiny that was never designed with their names on it. The Apostle Peter adds another layer to this story in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. He reveals that God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them into Tartarus. And this is the only time this word appears in the entire New Testament. The Greek term Tartaru was known in Hellenistic culture as the deepest place of the underworld, below Hades itself, reserved for the worst criminals of mythology. Peter deliberately uses this cultural reference to communicate something that transcends any mythology. There is a real place of detention where fallen angels are confined while they await the final judgment. Tartarus is not their permanent destination. It is the temporary prison, the antechamber of the verdict. The lake of fire, described in Revelation chapter 20, verse 10, is the final and irreversible destination. And Jude, verse 6 of his epistle, supplements with additional details. And the angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Eternal chains, total darkness, reserved under custody for a judgment that already has a set date and a defined verdict before it is even convened. These are the angels who followed the rebellious cherub in his original insurrection, those who composed that devastating 1/3. And each one of them remains confined, restrained, awaiting the tribunal described in Revelation. Revelation chapter 20 draws the final sequence with a clarity that leaves no room for ambiguity or alternative interpretation. Verse 10, "And the devil, who deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night, forever and ever, forever and ever." The original Greek expression is eis tous aionas ton aionon, literally, unto the ages of the ages. A superlative construction indicating duration without end, without interval, without pause, and without possibility of termination. There is no exit clause. There is no procedural review. There is no court of appeal. The cherub who walked among stones of fire in the glorious presence of God will be consumed by fire in the eternal absence of God. The irony is devastating and deliberate, but the verse that freezes the blood comes shortly after. Revelation 20 verses 14 and 15. "Then death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire." This is the second death. "And anyone not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire." Anyone not found written. Human beings, real people with names, stories, and choices. Not because the lake was made for them, but because they chose, consciously or unconsciously, the same path that the original cherub inaugurated. The same radical autonomy, the same refusal of the Creator's authority, the same silent or explicit declaration that echoes Isaiah 14, "I will be my own God." Notice what this reveals in practice. Hell, the eternal lake of fire, was engineered, designed, and prepared for a specific being and his angelic followers. Every human being who ends up in that place is, technically, occupying a space that was not built for them. It is like being imprisoned in a cell designed for another type of criminal. You should not be there. The system was not assembled with you in mind, but your choices, accumulated over an entire lifetime, led you through walls that were erected to contain another creature. And it is here that the biblical narrative about hell becomes more complex and more deeply disturbing than any simplistic reduction can capture. Because the scriptures do not present God as a being who pushes people into torment with satisfaction or indifference. They present a God who did absolutely everything that could possibly be done to prevent any human being from even coming close to that destiny. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 9 declares clearly, "The Lord is not slow concerning his promise, as some count slowness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance." Long-suffering. Patient beyond any human measure, waiting, giving time, extending opportunities generation after generation, like someone holding the door open and shouting for people to get out of a burning building while the beams are already cracking. 1 Timothy chapter 2 verses 3 and 4 reinforces with a declaration that admits no ambiguity. God desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. All, without ethnic, geographic, social, moral, or historical exception. The divine desire recorded in the scriptures is unequivocal and repeated. No human being should go to the place that was prepared for the devil and his angels. Every person who ends up there represents, from the biblical perspective, a tragedy, not a victory of divine justice, but a defeat of human will in the face of an offer that was extended with superhuman patience until the very last possible second. And this is the part of the story that is almost never told in full from the pulpits, and much less in everyday conversations. Eden was not merely the setting for human temptation. It was the second chapter of the same cosmic war. The cherub, who had failed to take the throne by force, changed his strategy. He decided to corrupt the creation made in God's image. Genesis chapter 3 is not an isolated narrative about an apple and a serpent. It is the direct and logical continuation of Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. The same being, the same destructive ambition, just a different method. If he could not bring God down directly, he would try to destroy what God loved most, the creature made in his image and likeness. The serpent in the garden did not offer Eve military power, material wealth, or longevity. It offered exactly what it had desired for itself, equivalence with God. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. The same bait wrapped in different paper, the same central lie coated in intellectual curiosity, the same proposal that generated the original fall, now repackaged for human consumption. And it worked. Humanity bit, literally, into the offer of autonomy. And from that instant, the destiny that had been prepared exclusively for the devil and his angels became a real possibility for beings who should never have been on that list. The rescue plan began at the very instant of the fall. Genesis chapter 3 verse 15 records the first messianic promise in the Bible, the seed of the woman who would crush the serpent's head. God did not wait. He did not consult. He did not hesitate. At the very moment the tragedy was consummated, the rescue was announced. And from that point on, every sacrifice in the Old Testament pointed toward this moment of deliverance. Every lamb slaughtered upon the altar was a visual and bloody reminder. Someone will need to pay an incalculable price so that you do not go where you were never meant to go. Every prophet who warned Israel about judgment was at its core, shouting the same urgent message. Do not follow the path of the cherub. Do not choose autonomy over obedience. Do not trade the presence of the Creator for the illusion of being your own gods. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 14 reveals God's final strategy with a precision that should stop any reader mid-sentence. Since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same, so that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil. The Creator became a creature. The Eternal entered time. The one by whom and for whom the original cherub was created took on human form, fragile, mortal, vulnerable, specifically to destroy the power of the fallen cherub, not with angelic armies in battle formation, not with a crushing display of cosmic force, with death. The voluntary death of the Son of God himself was the weapon that disarmed the adversary forever. And when Christ died on the cross, Matthew chapter 27 verse 51 records that the veil of the temple, that thick curtain that had separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the world for centuries, was torn from top to bottom. From top to bottom. The direction matters. It indicates that the action came from above, not from below. God tore the separation. The barrier between his presence and the people, which had existed since the days of Moses at Sinai, was eliminated in a single sovereign and irreversible act. Access was restored. The path to the presence of God, which had been blocked since Eden, was reopened by the death of the one who had created Eden itself. Colossians chapter 2 verses 14 and 15 completes the picture of the cross with the language of military triumph. Christ disarmed principalities and powers. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. Disarmed, exposed, triumphed, three verbs of total victory. The cross was not a disguised defeat. It was a public tribunal. It was the exact moment, when the destiny of the rebellious cherub and all his followers was publicly confirmed without possibility of appeal, and simultaneously, the moment when humanity received a permanent escape route from the destiny that was never designed for it. Hell continues to exist. The lake of fire awaits its original recipients with unwavering patience. Revelation 20 describes in detail the future moment when Satan will finally be cast into the place that was prepared since the rebellion specifically for him and for those who followed him. But between the creation of this place and its final occupation, there exists a window of time. And within this window, billions of human beings throughout all of history make the decision that defines where they will spend eternity. The story of hell is not a story about a place. It is a story about choices. The first choice was made by a being who had everything: incomparable beauty, supreme position, direct and unrestricted access to the Creator, and decided he wanted more. The consequence of that choice created a destiny that did not exist before it. Every human being who has ever lived inherited something from that original moment: the capacity to choose. The same free will that transformed the most glorious cherub of all creation into the most feared adversary in the universe is exactly what operates in every human decision, every day, on every corner of the planet. Hell was not created for you, but the door is open, and what determines who enters is not an arbitrary decree from heaven. It is the same principle that started everything: a choice. The first wrong choice created hell. Your next choice determines whether you will ever need to know it.